story. And a Fox News alert, continued developments as North Korea launches another ballistic missile, setting up a major international test for the Trump administration. Some would say its first international test. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe speaking at a hastily arranged news conference in the Winter White House, calling the missile test, quote, absolutely intolerable. President Trump saying the United States backs Japan 100%. To South Florida in a minute. But first, Garrett Tenney, who's tracking the developments here in Washington. Hi, Garrett.
Hey, Leland. North Korea has not made it a secret that its goal is to develop a nuclear missile that's capable of hitting the United States, and it has aggressively been working towards that goal. A spokesman for the U.S. Strategic Command tells us they detected the missile launch yesterday evening and that it was likely a medium or intermediate range ballistic missile, meaning it didn't have the range to reach the U.S., but could have easily reached a number of U.S. allies in the region. The missile eventually landed outside of Japan's territorial waters, but the pace and scale of these tests continue to be a major concern. In the last year, North Korea has attempted 24 missile launches and 2 nuclear tests. This latest test is the first, as you mentioned, since Donald Trump became president and is widely seen as North Korea testing the new administration, a point Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer made this morning on CBS's Face the Nation. And for its part, South Korea has strongly denounced North Korea's latest ballistic missile launch, saying it shows Pyongyang is fanatically obsessed with nuclear and missile development. And hours after the launch, the head of South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said their military stands ready to respond immediately to any provocation that threatens their safety, and warned that if the northern regime does not give up its delusion of nuclear and missile provocations, that they will ultimately destroy themselves in the near future. And this latest test, like nearly all of the previous ones in the last year, was in violation of UN Security Council resolutions, meaning more sanctions could be placed on the North in the near future, though it's important to note that President Kim Jong-un has said nothing will stop his country from further developing these weapons. Leland?
We'll have to see if the Chinese or Russians would agree to those sanctions as well. Garrett Tenney here in Washington. Thanks, Garrett. Liz has more.
Well, North Korea's missile launch is a new foreign policy test for President Donald Trump. He responded last night following news of the incident as Mar-a-Lago resort with just a few words, about 14 seconds to be exact. Kristen Fisher is live in West Palm Beach with the very latest. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Liz. Well, Prime Minister Abe is already on his way back to Japan, and he is returning with some very strong assurances from President Trump, which is exactly what he came here for. President Trump promised that the U.S. will continue to defend Japan, and we got our first real taste of what this newly recommitted relationship will look like in that hastily arranged press conference late last night. The two world leaders were just about to sit down to dinner here at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach when North Korea fired off this missile. 3.5 hours later, the two world leaders were standing side by side. Prime Minister Abe called the launch intolerable, while President Trump said this in response to the first North Korean missile launch of his presidency.
I just want everybody to understand and fully know that the United States of America stands behind Japan, its great ally, 100%.
So it was a brief response, short enough to fit into a tweet. The question now is, will he respond even more once he gets back to Washington? Now, next week, President Trump is poised to meet with 2 more world leaders, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Also next week, the president is considering signing an entirely new executive order on immigration to counter what happened to that controversial first order, which got struck down in court. Here's White House Chief Policy Advisor Stephen Miller this morning.
The 3 judges made a broad, overreaching statement about the ability to check the executive power and did not even address what I was talking about, which was INA 212F, 8 U.S.C. 1182F, the power of the president to exclude aliens in the national interest.
As for what's next, Miller says all possible options are still on the table, including seeking an emergency stay at the Supreme Court. Liz?
All right, Kristen Fisher reporting live on a working weekend. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
A little bit more on this with Fox News contributor, retired Army General Jack Keane. General, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Lynn.
Hard to imagine the timing is a coincidence here.
No, not at all. Prompted clearly by Secretary Mattis's visit to the region, The exact timing certainly coincided with Prime Minister Japan's visit to the United States.
Well, not only his visit, but his golf game interrupted their dinner. You know, nobody likes to get pulled away from dinner with news of a missile test. What great CIA analyst who I know pretty well described the North Koreans as the ultimate shakedown regime, or extortionists, if you will. What do they want out of all this? Is this they want to test President Trump, or they want some kind of payoff, or both?
Well, first of all, the nuclear weapons guarantee the preservation of the regime in their mind. In other words, there's not going to be a conventional attack of North Korea as long as they have nuclear weapons. That's what I believe Saddam Hussein wanted, and other countries in the world as well. What's going on with the ballistic missiles that they're trying to achieve, an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the United States of all things, are they seriously thinking about firing such a thing? Likely not. We have to take it seriously because capabilities are what we look at. But the reality is getting exactly back to your CIA analyst friend. It's to seek concessions largely from the South Koreans and also from the United States. That's what they're doing. They use it as leverage. What kind of
concessions do they want, though? They want money?
Yeah, financial, economic assistance. The regime is in just destitute state. What money they do have, they use to militarize the state. And you could see the people themselves, and their physicality is dramatically different than the South Koreans.
Is there any reason, though, to make a deal with this regime? We think about how we got here in terms of the North Koreans having a nuclear weapon. It was because of a deal, food, money, agriculture assistance made by President Clinton in return for them allegedly destroying their nuclear program. Didn't happen, but they still got all the goodies.
We've had 3 presidents, 2 decades plus, trying to work China as leverage against the North Koreans, and what we have is nuclear weapons arsenal now and heading towards ballistic missiles capable of delivering them. So the policy with China, certainly as leverage, has failed. We'll see. President Trump is determined to negotiate better deals with China than his predecessor.
He says he can negotiate better deals with everybody.
Yeah. Well, he's going to be tested on that, to be sure. I do know this. I think the countries in the world look at President Trump as a decisive, strong leader, likely somewhat unpredictable, but he has spent the initial 2.5 weeks in office reassuring allies that American leadership is back, and that is basically a good thing.
We heard in Kristen Fisher's report from President Trump 33 words, 14 seconds in terms of saying, we stand with Japan. Didn't say we stand with South Korea. Didn't say there's going to be consequences. Didn't have really much teeth to it other than, gee, this was bad. Is that a misstep?
No. Let's give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt here. The missile test just took place. He wanted to make a statement that he's standing behind Japan, reassuring Japan that American leadership is going to be there. That is the principal statement to be made. The policy as it pertains to South Korea, they need additional military capability, I believe. I think that's part of General Mattis's visit there. He's looking at what capabilities do they have, what don't they have. The same thing with Japan. I also think he's checking on their mettle. In other words, how much spine do they have as these provocations increase?
Any reports that you've gotten back from that visit?
No. I'm just speculating. General Mattis, Central Command, Middle East expert, Far East, doesn't know as much about it, wants to look them in the eye.
Go kick the tires, see who our allies are.
Exactly.
And obviously there's a lot more U.S. military hardware going there, the THAAD system, et cetera, into South Korea. General, appreciate your insights, sir.
Good talking to you.
All the best. Liz?
All right, let's continue our conversation and bring in our fair and balanced panel to weigh in on President Trump's options regarding North Korea. We have Republican strategist and Edward Murrow Fellow at Tufts University, Adam Goodman, and Hari Sivagun from 270 Strategies. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Hari, I want to start with you. I think I may know your response to this. Were you pleased with the president's response last night?
Well, I'm glad he responded. I mean, the initial response was about Mark Cuban, so it is reassuring. But I do think that what's happened with North Korea, as well as the missile tests in Iran, as well as Russian aggression around the Ukraine, is a natural consequence of this president emboldening our adversaries and our enemies, and at the same time alienating our allies. You see what he did with Australia and the Prime Minister.
Okay, we're getting a little bit of a different message from the White House. I want to play, in response to what you're claiming, a quick soundbite from White House advisor Stephen Miller. Take a listen, and I want to get your response.
The message is that we are going to reinforce and strengthen our vital alliances in the Pacific region as part of our strategy to deter and prevent the increasing hostility that we've seen in recent years from the North Korean regime.
That's what we're hearing from the White House. And Hari, you're saying that he's alienating our allies. So I do want to get your response, Adam.
Well, I can tell you what you're seeing right now, Elizabeth, is Reagan-esque. It's called peace through strength. We live in a fairly dangerous world. We needed any reminder about what we're dealing with. In the last 12 hours, we've seen a madman who leads a country with nuclear toys. That's starting to basically send a message to not just to Donald Trump, to all of us, to see what we're made of. I like the fact that last night the president stood with Prime Minister Abe, and they stood shoulder to shoulder, and they said, we're in this together. Just like recently we saw the Prime Minister of Great Britain, when she came to America, do the same. I think this is a time in a very dangerous world where we're dealing with transnational jihadists, we're dealing with a Syrian civil war, we're dealing with Iran and Iraq and Russia, that we have to first reinforce our alliances. And I think last night at the Southern White House, the Winter White House, we saw an example of where Donald Trump is going to be very Reagan-like, and he's going to stand tall with our allies and stand tall for security.
Okay, so Adam, so you're saying it's Reagan-esque, and Hari, obviously you're getting a different interpretation. So what do you want to see from the president in situations like this? When you see, a provocation from another country, what do you want to see from the White House?
I'd like to see a consistent message. I mean, I'm glad he made these statements with Prime Minister Abe yesterday, but during the campaign, he said he was threatening to withdraw U.S. troops from the region. He said that he would consider withdrawing from NATO. That's not standing by our allies. That's sending, at best, a very mixed message.
Adam, your response?
Well, I can respond by saying this. For instance, with our alliances, I think we have to do a better job, all of us, all the countries, for instance, in NATO. There are 28 countries, and only 5 pay their fair share. I think it's time for all of us to stand tall together, to measure up to a world that's become far more dangerous. I think Donald Trump is showing the kind of leadership that I think puts America back, not just on the world stage, but back in the league.
All right, we only have about a minute left, but I do want to get in on the panel in regards to the fact that we could be seeing a new executive order come down this week. And Hari, I want to start with you. What needs to be going on behind the scenes? Do you want to see a new executive order, or do you want to see the executive order that took place about 2 weeks ago challenged in court?
Well, I think either way, I think there are fundamental problems with the executive order in terms of a legal standing as well as a constitutional standing. The law that they rely on, the Immigration and Nationality Act, was actually amended in 1965, so you cannot discriminate based on nationality. So there is a legal problem there. I think there are also constitutional problems.
All right, Adam, I want to give you the last word, because there were those 7 countries, not necessarily specific religions, laid out in that executive order.
These countries were the same countries of concern that President Obama was worried about. I think the president has statutory authority to do what he set out to do, and we need to do this to reassure the American people we're safe.
All right, Adam, Hari, we'll leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this Sunday. We appreciate it. And stay tuned right after this show for Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace will be talking with President Trump's senior policy advisor, Stephen Miller. We played a quick soundbite for you just moments ago. And Senate Foreign Relations Committee ranking member Ben Cardin. Check your right after the show, 2 p.m.
A lot of news coming out of those interviews. Remember this awkward encounter? A lot of news here, too, between President Barack Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This is 2001, 2011. They didn't look so happy. It seemed to sum up their relationship. Now there's a new leader in the White House, of course. So will the Israeli Prime Minister get a better reception when he comes to town this week? Preview of that visit coming up. Plus, President Trump's reach for the stars, how the new president is changing the course of America's space race. Astronaut Clayton Anderson on how NASA is responding. And you never want this to happen. Passengers on a United flight from Austin to San Francisco had a strange and disturbing encounter with their pilot just before takeoff. We'll tell you what happened to the pilot and the passengers.
This is a Fox News alert. Toxic air in one of Germany's busiest airports left more than 50 people injured and caused hundreds to flee into freezing temperatures outside. Air traffic at the Hamburg airport has resumed now, but flights were halted after people started feeling nauseous. They started feeling their eyes were burning and they had trouble breathing. Firefighters responding, believing pepper spray may have spread through the airport's air conditioning system, but as of right now, they do not know how that happened. That is terrifying.
Important to figure out, you think. All right. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu didn't shy away from admitting that U.S.-Israeli relations were on rocky ground when former President Obama left office. Come Wednesday, President Trump will attempt to thaw that relationship when he meets with Mr. Netanyahu here in Washington. President Trump campaigned as a staunch ally of Israel, but he's toned down some of that talk in the weeks since taking office. Today, Netanyahu said he would present, quote, reasonable policies to President Trump, signaling to some of Israel's far right to perhaps tone down their expectations. Jared Kushner also expected to play a key role in those meetings.
All right, more on a story we just told you about. Some pretty strange behavior by United Airlines pilot is now under investigation by the company. The pilot was removed from a flight after a bizarre rant about politics and divorce over the intercom while preparing for takeoff. Brian Yennis has the full story on something probably none of us really want to ever experience.
Hi, Elizabeth. That's right. It's one of the last things you want to see just after you board a flight. Your pilot having a mental breakdown, and that's exactly what happened. According to terrified passengers on United Flight 455 on Saturday, which was going from Austin, Texas to San Francisco. According to passengers on board, the airline pilot, standing in front of the entire cabin wearing civilian clothing, asked for a vote on whether she should change into a uniform. Then she got into politics, explaining to passengers that she did not vote for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump because they are both liars and insert expletive I cannot say on TV. Then the airline pilot began ranting about her divorce. According to passengers who began tweeting to United Airlines, they started tweeting to get a new pilot fast. Reportedly, some 20 passengers said they did not feel safe and got off the plane, like Randy Rice, who tweeted, "So y'all, I'm shaking right now. I just left my United Flight 455 because the captain demonstrated that she was not mentally in a safe place." A new pilot was brought on, and 2-hour delay later, the flight took off. Listen to some passengers, though, after they landed.
She was venting. She mentioned her divorce.
She started off by saying that she had not voted for either Trump or Clinton because they're a bunch of liars. Yeah, so that's an odd way to start off the welcome to your flight. But, yeah, it just really sort of went downhill from there and didn't make a lot of sense to any of us.
In a statement, United Airlines said, "We hold our employees to the highest standards and have replaced this pilot with a new one to operate the flight, which has since departed Austin. We apologize to our customers for the inconvenience." United says they will discuss this incident with the pilot, but a bizarre, scary, and truthfully a sad story on board that flight. We all have our tough days. Who knows what's going on in her head, but that's unfortunate for all those involved.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Hopefully she gets the help that she needs. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
No problem.
Leland?
All right. North Korea violates UN sanctions again. Some new details coming in on our top story and the president's response. Plus, Congress, they're back in session tomorrow. So will President Trump get any closer to filling up his cabinet? New details on the breaking news out of North Korea and the U.S. response. The North Koreans launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile, setting up what has become the first major foreign policy test for the Trump administration. The missile launch is North Korea's first since October, and that is, of course, forbidden under UN Security Council resolutions. The missile, we're told, flew about 300 miles eastward, clearing the North Korean peninsula and landing in the Sea of Japan. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the launch absolutely intolerable at a press conference that was quickly assembled last night at the Winter White House. Mr. Abe is a guest of Mr. Trump down there for the weekend. The president said the U.S. stands with Japan, quote, 100%. Prime Minister Abe has since left Florida en route back to Japan. UN sanctions, though, have failed so far to curb the Kim regime. Last month, North Korea said it's close to testing an intercontinental range ballistic missile. See if that happens.
Well, President Trump is wrapping up his trip in Mar-a-Lago. Back here in Washington, lawmakers are preparing to go head-to-head in the fight to confirm members of Mr. Trump's cabinet. First on the docket, Steve Mnuchin for Treasury Secretary. Here with the very latest on the gridlock is Lauren Blanchard. Hey, Lauren.
Hi, Liz. Well, the fight on Capitol Hill these last few weeks to confirm President Trump's cabinet have not been pretty. Slowly but surely, the members are being confirmed, but the Trump administration says the holdup is hurting Americans, while Democrats say they're just doing their due diligence.
We can't stop these nominees. We know that. We're going to use our time to make sure that people understand the background of these individuals, their commitment to the agency that they are being appointed to, and so we can hold them accountable. And yes, in some cases, we would hope that Republicans may join us in questioning whether this person is the best person for the position.
On Monday, the Senate is voting on former Goldman Sachs executive Steven Mnuchin to be the next Treasury Secretary. This as a handful of other nominees are in a holding pattern on Capitol Hill, now waiting for the Senate to schedule a vote on their confirmation.
They lost the election. They're in the process of losing their mind. The bottom line is the left is going nuts. They can't understand why they lost. They want to attack Trump at every stage.
Although Republicans seem to be a united front on getting President Trump's remaining cabinet nominees confirmed, there are still deep disagreements between the president and some members of Congress. President Trump tweeting his displeasure to senators on both sides of the aisle, McCain and Blumenthal, for criticizing his policies to the media. After Senator McCain questioned the success of a recent raid in Yemen that left one U.S. service member dead, and Blumenthal told reporters that during a private meeting, the Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch expressed concern over the president's comments about the judiciary. The president has said the press is mischaracterizing Gorsuch's comments and has since used his Twitter account to criticize both Senators Blumenthal and McCain. McCain has not formally responded to the tweets, while Blumenthal said he hopes Trump will listen to his own staff. Liz?
All right, what will we do without Twitter? Lauren Blanchard reporting live. Thank you so much.
All right, a lot to unpack there on Twitter and other places as well. Who better to help us than Susan Friccio of the Washington Examiner. Susan, great to see you.
And you.
All right, right now, big topic is confirmations on the cabinet. There are 8 cabinet positions left so far for President Trump for confirmation votes. This week, we saw Betsy DeVos need the vice president to break the tie. Any one of those 8 on the screen going to have that tough of a time?
Well, I've got my eye on the Labor Secretary nominee, Andy Puzder, who is struggling right now. He's had
otherwise known as the Carl's Jr. guy.
He's right, the Burger CEO King. He has had his confirmation delayed, the hearings 4 times now, in part because some paperwork was forthcoming from the Office of Government Ethics. Democrats have their eye on him. In other words, you saw the job they did on Betsy DeVos. They were very successful putting her on the spot and weakening her candidacy with Democrats and Republicans. She lost 2 Republicans because of her so-called poor performance. And I think they're hoping to do the same with Puzder based on...
How much does you picking Puzder, and for that matter the Democrats picking Puzder, have to do with the fact that it is a major Democratic constituency? Teachers union versus Betsy DeVos, labor unions versus Andy Puzder.
That's it. And it's his stance on these issues as well. He's in favor of job automation. He is not a fan of minimum wage increases. And
We've heard more about right to work.
Doesn't like Obamacare. He's checks off all the boxes for someone Democrats and labor groups would be opposed to. And so I think that you're going to see the questions, they want to try to take him down. Now, his hearing has been scheduled for next week, and there's, it's on for now. They've got the paperwork in. But I think Republicans are hoping, by delaying it, they provided some kind of cooling off period between the DeVos confirmation hearing and now.
Try to stop the momentum. No problem for Steve Mnuchin?
Well, he's set to be confirmed on Monday. He was delayed, though. Don't forget, they really tried to slow walk him, and they managed to do so.
And Chris Wallace had a fantastic graphic on Fox News Sunday, full show after this, but he brought up the point that essentially President Trump has half the number of cabinet members confirmed as President Bush did at the same time 16 years ago, a little less than half of what President Obama did 8 years ago. He then asked the Democrats this.
Isn't this blatant Democratic obstruction?
Not at all. We can't stop these nominees. We know that. We can't block when it's brought to the floor. We can't block when the votes take place. That the Republican leader decides. All we can do is use the time that's allotted to us to make our points, and that's what we're doing. We're not blocking these appointments.
All right, so they're admitting they can't block them. What's the Democrats' end game? Are they playing to their constituencies, or they got something else going on?
Their end game is to stop the Trump administration from succeeding. They've actually been quite transparent about that. Not in that last soundbite, but I've heard Chuck Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate, say pretty explicitly that they were doing this to try to stop Trump from implementing his agenda, and that they are succeeding in doing that. Look, we're already into February. We still, we just barely got the HHS secretary in, and the Treasury secretary hasn't been confirmed yet. All of this slows down Trump's agenda. It also hobbles him, and look what's happened so far.
We haven't even got anywhere near dealing with Obamacare, with tax reform, building the wall, all things that have sort of been pushed back simply to deal with this cabinet.
It's tripped him up, too. It's tripped him up several times. You could see where a cabinet position would have perhaps made much more smooth some of the rollout of some of his agenda so far.
Well, we certainly saw that in terms of the travel ban.
Absolutely.
Travel ban situation. Looking forward, how dangerous is this, though, for Democrats in the sense that you've got a number of Democrats who are up for election come 2018, obviously all the House, but a significant number of senators up in 2018 in states that Trump won. Right. Are they worried? Are folks like Manchin out of West Virginia afraid, or are they willing to continue this Schumer obstructionism?
I think this will play in, of course, with the Supreme Court nominee, which will be the big test for these 8 who you talk about who are up in 2018. For some, it will matter. Others, it won't. It's hard to determine how influential what their view on the Supreme Court nominee is. It's not really known, really, at this point. It depends how well they explain it to their constituents. My prediction is that there won't be the nuclear option, that Gorsuch will be confirmed, and that Democrats will help, not so much because they're worried about 2018, but because Democrats will fear there may be another appointment because we've got 2 or 3 judges in their 80s, 2 of them Clinton appointees. They may decide to hold their fire for a more important swing justice in the future. That's what I think is going to happen there. I think that actually outweighs your last question about the 2018 issue with these Democrats. I think Democrats are more worried about that. Mm-hmm.
Well, and we saw this election really turn on that issue as well. Great seeing you. Thanks for being here. Liz?
After the break, President Donald Trump wants to boldly go where no job creator has gone before. How the president wants to reimagine the space program with a focus on the economy.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, as you know, President Donald Trump promised jobs on the campaign trail, and now he says he wants to create job opportunities in the final frontier. Internal documents reported by Politico detail the Trump administration's goals for beefing up NASA, but also promoting economic development in space using private companies. So what does the future hold for the Trump space race? Former NASA astronaut and author of The Ordinary Spaceman, Clayton Anderson, joins us now. He's a friend of the show to talk about the future of space travel. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
The reports that we're seeing out of Politico are ambitious. It says here the president wants to send humans to the moon and reach, quote, large-scale economic development of space. Is it feasible? He wants to do it, apparently, by 2020.
Yeah, I think that I can't answer the question of can we do it by 2020, but I am an advocate for going back to the moon first, and I also agree in commercialization of space. I think that's the way to go as well.
Okay, because that's a big debate between the public and the private, and I want to read a quote from the article, from one of the articles, if I may. It says, the proposed strategy, whose potential for igniting a new industry appeals to Trump's business background and job creation pledges, is influencing the White House's search for leaders to run the space agency, and is setting off a struggle for supremacy between traditional aerospace contractors and the tech billionaires who have put big money into private space ventures. So the question of privatization, your reaction to that?
Well, I think if we all look back to Orville and Wilbur at Kitty Hawk, nobody knew that we would be flying airplanes to Abu Dhabi with the opportunity to go to the bar or the shower or to sleep in a room and do work. So I think the idea of commercializing spaceflight is a popular paradigm shift, but there's still risk involved. And in order to do this and do this successfully, we have to keep that in mind. We used to say in the engineering world, better, faster, cheaper, pick any two. If you want to consider those things, you can't have all of it. And so if you want it to be better and you want it to be faster, then you're going to have to pay for it.
I'm just wondering what that landscape looks like. How does the private sector get involved and then work alongside NASA? How would those two, would they compete with each other? I mean, how would that work?
You know, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I think we're doing it now, though, right? We have NASA folks working with these various commercial companies. We also have astronauts who are supporting their efforts to make sure that we try to do this safely and minimize the risk as much as we can.
Now, this may be a little bit of a stretch here. In the article, there was talk of utilizing resources, and the topic of property rights came up. For someone like me, that's just really unfathomable. So I sort of wanted to get your reaction just when you hear that come up. How would that work in space?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that either, but if you look at the analogy of perhaps the folks that went west during the gold rush, right, when gold is found and claims are staked, it was a different time, and I think we do have organizations today and universities across the United States and perhaps the world that are actually looking at the legal aspects of space and trying to establish constraints and ideas and philosophies to take forward. So we'll just have to wait and see how that all plays out.
So my final question is, what would you do if you